Hi everyone and welcome to CX Today. My name is Charlie and today I'm once again joined by four excellent customer experience analysts to run through all the latest news from the space. Yesterday I'm thrilled to be joined by Zeus Kerravala, the Principal Analyst at ZK Research, Liz Miller, VP and Principal Analyst at Constellation Research, Shelly Kramer, President and CEO at Kramer and Company, and Keith Kirkpatrick, the Research Director at the Futurum Group. It's great to have you all join me, and let's get right on into the news. And we're going to start with a little bit of a tricky one, to put it mildly, and that's the new lawsuit alleging that a prominent CCaaS provider, Genesis, recorded a domestic violence hotline communications without permission. It also accuses the vendor of mining those communications for its own services. And at this stage, it must be stressed that these are only accusations. But I'd love to hear kind of all of your thoughts on what Genesis customers should maybe take away from this, and whether you think that we could see more lawsuits like this cropping up within the space too. And I don't know, Liz, if I maybe want to kind of throw this one first to you.
Yeah, this one's a tricky one. I think that when the lawsuit last year was filed against Patagonia, claiming that through its vendor, it had recorded calls and had used AI and used various different technologies and analyzed communications, that it had crossed the line. And when that lawsuit came out, I think literally all of us on this call said there are going to be more. This is not going to be the standout. There are going to be more. I will say though that I did not take such a dramatic vendor, take such a dramatic example as a domestic violence hotline as the next suit. And I do think that let's be very honest about what happened, but also let's be very fair about what happened. I think that when a lot of new AI technologies were introduced, I think all four of us, when we were at various vendor conferences, kind of kept raising this call and kept raising this flag when vendors would say, these are my calls. We've analyzed millions of calls, and that's why our AI is better than anyone else's AI, is because the calls that we have, and these are our calls. And I can recall every single one of us on this call raising our hands and saying, are they your calls? Are they your calls, or are they the customer's calls? And multiple vendors would kind of have the same response, which was, these calls come over our cloud. Therefore, because we anonymize them, it's okay to analyze them and use them as training data for our AI. And I think we were all trying to give that early warning message in like 2020, 2021, especially 2022, of guys, that's not how the law is going to see this. But more importantly, it's not how customers are going to see this. And not just your customer, but your customer's customer. And I think that's exactly what's happened here. They did not have any of the kind of warning notifications of, hey, this call is not only being recorded, but may be used to train AI. Hey, this first experience you're going to have here in a highly sensitive environment is actually going to be an AI. It is actually going to be another vendor. But the other thing, yes, Genesis, I would say, had the onus to train its customers perhaps a little bit differently to have those conversations, especially in light of the Patagonia lawsuit last year. But I think that there was a bigger conversation that probably needed to happen in about 2022, 23 to say, is it our call? Is it really our call, or is it the call of our customer? I will say, though, that I don't necessarily know if Genesis, the vendor, is to blame here. I've never known them to be a nefarious party running around being like, I'm going to install this and listen to all of these really horrid conversations. I think it's more of a matter of they saw, that this foundation probably saw a cost savings, and we won't know what actually happens until this case moves forward, when we hear more facts about the case and not just allegations. But they likely put this in because it was going to save time, and it was going to get the right person into the hands of the right agent who's going to have the right advice and the right information. But the way it's handled, the way we give those warnings and the way we give that information and the transparency, a lot of times our customer, our technology customer, does not know what they do not know. And I think for all vendors in the space, this is a real call to action to be able to say, hey guys, it's time to pass along the best practices.
I think part of the problem is all these vendors built their products so fast, right?
Oh yeah.
And they really wanted to get products to market. I don't think if we looked under the covers, I'm not sure there's a vendor out there that didn't use some of their customer data somewhere along the line, right? Either by accident or maybe to accelerate things. You even see, Zoom initially said we'll use our customer data, but with their permission, and they got such negative backlash for that, they actually repealed that. So we're just not going to use it at all, right?
Yeah.
And even when they said we'll only do it with customer permission, and so I think just the speed at which all these vendors came to market and had to roll the competitive pressure, there were some mistakes made somewhere, and I don't think, like to your point, I don't think Genesis specifically targeted, that customer or that hotline. Something slipped through the cracks, but there's no question we're going to see more of these.
Well, the something slipped through the cracks thing is, what resonates with me, Zeus. And here's the thing. How many times have you seen an ad campaign, Liz, and said, there was not a woman in the room, y'all, when this was conceived? And how it ever made it out the door, I'll never know.
But it was pink. Shelly,
right? It was pink.
Shelly's
right?
pink.
But here's the thing, and we are at a time when trust in AI systems is the holy grail for vendors, right? And to your point, Zeus, yes, we rush things out the door as quickly as possible so that everyone can capitalize. But the reality of it is, I see a difference in, talking to a Patagonia rep who is recording conversations without my authorization, and me calling a domestic violence hotline worried for my life, and knowing that information, there's a difference here, people.
Huge.
There's a difference.
And it's not the first time.
No. And the onus is on the vendor, not the customer, to say, wait a minute, we need to look at what our terms of services are, what our practices are, and we need to make sure that we are serving this customer in a way that serves their customer base, because trust in our systems is paramount. And I think that's really where, this is a failing on the benefit. And to your point, Liz, Genesis didn't go, I think it was your point, it might have been Zeus's, but this was not an intentional thing. But to me,
they didn't need domestic violence training. Yeah,
correct.
Yeah,
this was a miss.
And while you say there's a difference, there is a difference. But whatever process caused that, it could have been any company, right? And there probably are others that just they don't know about. So,
yes, there is an onus on the vendor, but also the customer. If you think
100%.
about, ultimately, the buck does stop with them as well, because it's their end customers that are, certainly losing trust in them. If you're that domestic violence hotline organization, if you're a person calling, do you trust them now? I don't think so. I don't know what it takes to get it back.
And I think, again, it comes back to that whole, when people, when someone at the very top, when you're top donors, when you're top whomever, right? Again, we don't know the details, but they'll come out. But when they're saying, do you have AI? Because I bet we could help more people if we put AI somewhere in this. That has got to be a really hard conversation to be part of, right? But to your point, Keith, there is a responsibility. And I think that as we rushed out the technology, to Zeus's point, we somehow didn't rush out the responsibility train along with it. We were like, let's just go do it. But this is also we had airlines lining up bereavement fairs. We had a national eating disorder hotline telling people, the AI was telling people, God, you sound like you're really in distress. Comfort food really will help you feel better. You should go make some mac and cheese. We were telling people in the throes of body dysmorphia challenges to go eat a sheet tray of mac and cheese, right? We have proven time and time again that we may not be ready to let the machines just go and run rampant in our lives.
Liz, your examples point out a really interesting thing. When we think about deploying AI, the initial focus is on traditional metrics. Let's get more cases
100%.
handled, as opposed to let's look at how AI can be used to overall improve the bottom line outcomes of whatever you do, whether it's selling more things or helping people in distress. And I think that's where there's been a bit of a breakdown.
And from the case, it seems like, even just from the filing, it seems like they may have, in a very strange way, I think that they wanted to from everything from the filing that we're seeing is that what they wanted to do was kind of collect initial information to route people correctly. Right. And so, like, if you are, if you are someone in crisis, if you're like, they wanted to get people into the right queue, which is a very, like, that's a great outcome. And that's a great place where you can apply AI. Yeah. But do you also then have a responsibility to tell the person on the phone, hey, you're about to speak with our digital agent. And what that means is this is AI. It's not a human, but we're going to get you to one. If you want to bypass this, don't rage scream. Like, you can. Like, I think it comes back to that choice. And it's like we didn't learn. Like, we haven't learned. We have not learned from our ills of IVR. Like, we still don't quite understand that the rage scream is our fault. Like, we still want to blame the customer who's like, operator! Like, we want to blame them for just not having patience. And I think that, but I think the difference here is that in the age of AI, there are no second chances. With people, if you're talking to a human agent, we as humans are more open to give that agent a second chance. Like, oh, they're fallible. Oh, they may have gave me, let me ask again. AI does it. No, you're done. You're done. You have one chance. I'm not coming back and using your AI assistant again. Yeah. This time, though, and I think this is the big announcement for both the vendors and the end technology buyers who are applying AI systems. You're going to get sued, right? It used to just be like, you're going to lose your customers, and oh my God, that's going to be the worst thing that happens to you. Yes, you're going to lose your customer, and you're getting sued. So now's the time to bring those acceptable use guidelines and your attorney into the conversation. I mean, that's the reality of where we're at.
Yeah. Well, that's it. But that's part of the problem of, having rushed these things along. We don't really have established best practices in that area, right?
100%.
So I'm not even sure all the, like, when you call into a brand and you get a virtual agent, they don't even disclose they're a virtual agent, right? But should they not? I don't know. Like,
we don't even have the best practices from IVRs. How many years, how long have we been implementing those? I mean, come on. But I mean, this is the new warning. Like, we got to get our acts together.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that's a nice message maybe to end that one on. And I'll move the conversation on to something maybe a little bit more positive. And that is...
Thanks, Charlie.
And that is Microsoft launching a new model for its CCaaS integrations with Microsoft Teams. And the model is known as Unify, and it's Microsoft's third model for contact center vendors to attach their offerings to the UCaaS platform. I believe it was going to be originally called Power, and they had promised sort of this Power model for, I think, over 3 years, and it's finally now here with a different name, though, and that is Unify. I don't know, Zeus, if you maybe want to kick us off by telling us a little bit about how this works and why it's significant.
I haven't looked at the model closely. I do think for Microsoft, it's an interesting approach where many of the vendors have chosen to stay model neutral, right? They've gone down the path of building their own, and I still don't really see them as a full-fledged CCaaS vendor. I also am not sure that when you look at the quality of teams, I trust them yet. But if they're going to create some sort of differentiation in the CCaaS space, I do think it is with that linkage with Teams. And I think the thing that I've liked from what they've done in the CCaaS space that I think is really interesting is the Qs product more than anything, right? Which is really more for, it's not meant for your traditional agent to service customers, but more for that power user that still needs to talk to customers to be able to do that. And that's where I see the value of this as being the thing that can help me bridge Teams conversations and customer conversations and make, queues really kind of, so when you think about UC, CC integration, queues is like a CX extension of UC, right? Where I think a lot of the other vendors are trying to be CX first and then extend UC off of that, where they're kind of flipping that around. And I think that could give them some pretty unique positioning and an ability to penetrate a market that's actually got way too many vendors in it right now, right? There's way too many suppliers. And so their ability to kind of, you think like AWS's go-to-market initially was go after the developers, an audience that had been underserved. So for Microsoft, it's go after those power users, an audience that I think has been underserved. And that I think was more so than the model itself, that's what I thought was interesting about that.
I think that the thing that caught me on my eye about this is it really keeps going down that path of let's stop calling everything a contact center solution.
Yeah.
Because I think to your point, like there are a lot of them out there. And right now it's just becoming this weird battle for everyone who's still doing like cloud migration deployments. Like they're all going to go arm wrestle in the Bay. And, I know we're going to talk about hybrid in a second, so I don't want to steal that thunder there, but we're all arm wrestling for a finite market, and there's plenty of money to go around, which is great, but there are still a lot of players. But it's leaving this mid-market, it's leaving these fast movers, it's leaving those organizations that it's not necessarily an SMB, like they've got a full-fledged service and contact center operations, but it's not a bazillion seats, right? They're not going to catch the attention of the big guys. They're kind of in this weird gap space, in this gap moment, but it's still a multi-trillion-dollar market. So if you actually stop calling it the thing that those organizations know nothing about, right? Those tend to be the organizations that didn't grow up in the contact center space. They just know it as service. And they know that they have to have all these different channels, and they know they have to have this voice thing someplace. But they also know that their organization runs on Teams. And it runs in Word, and it runs in Outlook. So why not build it around that so that it's a co-pilot for service? It's a co-pilot. So that API-driven model now all of a sudden becomes the center point. And what I thought was really interesting about the announcement was just how many of those vendors we say there are so many of are already certified and are already integrated into this offering. So you got Five9, you got Genesys. I mean, I think Cisco was even in there. If don't quote me on that one, but I think that the strategy here is an acknowledgement that voice is hard, right? It's like the universal truth. Voice is hard. They have figured out what they are good at, and they have figured out where that the organizations that they want to serve with this service contact center, whatever we're going to call it, co-pilot-y thingy, that market does not necessarily wake up in the morning and be like, I am a contact center operator and I need to go find a CCaaS because cloud migration is really important.
Well, and I think sometimes they're evaluating vendors in different ways. And the beauty of this here, which you both have already touched on in some way or another, is this Teams, built into Teams. So it's kind of like when we're using Teams for collaboration. Teams is my least favorite platform to use, but across the board, I'm sorry, Microsoft, it is. And by the way, I'm not the only person who feels that way. But the reality of it is, when you're a Microsoft shop, that's what you got, right? And so here's the deal. You're a Microsoft shop. You need to be able to have these capabilities. It's folded in, it's integrated. And so it serves those people who are saying, I'm already paying for this. We're already a Microsoft shop. What about this doesn't make sense for us? So
I'm already on Azure. Such a huge.
No, they're just building more integration into the product to make it tougher to displace, right? So
right. And that's kind of the goal, isn't it, people?
Right. Yeah. And it's also the admission that there's an ecosystem. I mean, but the funny thing is if you remember, I mean, I think all four of us were in the room, like 2 years ago. So not in England, but where were we? I can't remember where we were, but for 8x8 when they were like, someplace fun. When 8x8 was like we're a huge Microsoft shop. Like we partnered with Microsoft. We're going to put all this on top of Microsoft. And everyone's like, why do you keep piggybacking off of Teams? What are you trying to do? It's like, this is exactly why.
Yep.
Because there's an understanding.
There's a huge customer base that this serves very, very well.
It's a huge customer base. But I thought what I loved about this announcement was they were also like, listen, we're just going to call everything Copilot. Yeah. So I get there's a dude that's out there that likes to accuse us of just doing nothing but resurrecting Clippy. Clippy to the rescue. Here we go. Like at some point they're just going to start calling everything Clippy just to give the finger to that person, and it's going to be a funny moment. We're all going to be there to watch it and take pictures. That's fine.
But ultimately, it does. What kind of resonates with me is the idea of meeting your customers where they are. There's no reason to push a stone up a hill if you don't need to.
Yep.
That's
Absolutely.
Sisyphus they are not. It definitely makes sense. It definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. I think that's that topic covered very well. So I'm going to move on to our last news story to focus on, and that is Mitel exiting bankruptcy after just 42 days, slashing its debts by an astonishing 1.15 billion, I believe. It's now betting its future on hybrid enterprise communications deployments. And yeah, I don't know, Shelly, if you maybe want to start by giving us your take on what.
By the way, I don't think they've exited bankruptcy. I think they filed the paperwork to be approved to exit bankruptcy. So
excellent. Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, sorry, that is correct. Apologies for my misspeak there. But yeah,
not quite. They're this short. Yeah.
I have one job.
Great job, and you did. Just to touch on the bankruptcy thing, and I know we talked about this a little bit briefly, and we've all weighed in on this. I mean, this is not an indicator that Mitel is in trouble or anything else. This is a debt restructuring that makes a lot of sense, saves a ton of money, and also gives the company a ton of money to fund some of the stuff they want to do. So there's nothing about that should signal alarm bells or anything else. And so, the whole hybrid thing, the hybrid contact centers, I mean, they are in demand, and it is something that people want. And the flexibility, the cost savings, all of those things play a role here. And so I think that, and I touched on scalability already, but, the whole saving on operational costs and all of that sort of thing, the consistency that happens along the way. I mean, this is what customers want. This is what Mitel and others are trying to deliver. And so I think that there's a huge market for this for the foreseeable future, and every part of this path makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is the growth is certainly in the as a service, right? The multi-tenant public cloud.
Yeah.
But there are a number of customers that still want on-prem and hybrid.
Absolutely.
Everyone has exited this. NEC to Toshiba, even Cisco to a lot of degree, right? And so, and even Avaya has dropped out of the mid-market, low market. So there's one vendor left standing that can deliver on-prem, private cloud, hybrid cloud, whatever you want to call it, to that mid-market, and it's Mitel. And so,
who'd have thought?
No, and the thing of it is that the value prop there, though, Zeus, is 50-year-old company, really, really devoted to customer life cycle management and service across that, and really leaning into the people who have no desire to move off-prem and that sort of thing. So anyway, go on with your point, but I think that there's every reason to expect Mitel's success on this front.
Yeah. So my own point, it's not going to make him give him ever Canva valuation, right? No. So they're not going to be the next $50 billion company. But if you look at the way Dell runs its business, they're not a cloud company. They just sell you legacy stuff, and if you manage it correctly, there's a lot of money to be made. And so they've consolidated all those other players. And they've kind of fixed their platform now, so they only have one platform to sell versus 85 like they had before. There is a lot of there's a lot of money to be made in that. They for the most part control that market. They can control the pricing of it. So you can get margins up, and so again, it's not the most exciting thing we're going to talk about. But they're the last man standing for a market that's, like your point, Shelly, it's here for the foreseeable future. I mean, there's a lot of companies still running mainframes, right? And so, and,
but I think Dell is a great example that you brought out, right? It's Dell on its surface, if you were to go out and look at Dell and be like, oh my God, they did this to me, they should have held out, you could have all of those conversations, but walk into a data center and crack open all those machines that are actually running all of this high performing compute that makes all of this cloud, that makes all of this AI actually run, guarantee you're going to find a Dell product in there someplace, right? So there is a place that Dell is exploiting, taking advantage of what this modern time has. It's just not a big sticker on the front of the chassis. However, with Mitel, I think you're going to see the same thing, right? Because right before even all of the bankruptcy proceedings started, they had a big announcement with Genesis, wasn't it? It's Genesis and Zoom. I think there may have been another one tossed in there for fun. I mean, so they have rightly seen the market. They understand that, listen, we're still in need. We're not going to go hide under something. But I think they're also going to be that, break open a customer's Genesis implementation, and you very well are probably going to see some Mitel in there someplace, right? It's going to be that same story as Dell, and no one at Mitel is going to go home crying that they didn't get paid. I don't think that's the situation here, because again, it's a restructuring. I do think, however, and I would say this of Mitel, but I would also say this of Zeus, the brand that you just brought up, Avaya. There is still going to be a need for both of those brands to stay visible, and that is the Dell model, right? Dell stays visible. Dell didn't shrink into the background. Like Michael Dell didn't suddenly realize that he doesn't like talking in public to people, right? Like that was not something that happened here. Dell has stayed in the public face. They have stayed in the conversation. Yeah. Even if they don't sell something in the conversation, they've stayed in the conversation. And I think Mitel and Avaya are both going to need to do that. I think right now what we're seeing, and I think it's what we're seeing a little bit with Avaya, is like hey, we're in the conversation, but we're in the conversation very specifically with the enterprise. And I think that for both of these brands, if they want to really stay in the thick of the discussion for business transformation, lose that qualifier, right? Like just lose the qualifier in those PR moments and those great, when I'm talking in public moments, but stay out there, stay visible, or people are going to hear things like legal restructurings that is just a bookkeeping mechanism as like insolvency and oh my God, they're going down again, right? So you got to stay ahead of that curve. So for Mitel, like the advice here is, hey guys, stay in the thick of the conversation. Don't let that name go away. Don't let the logo go away. Stay relevant in the thought leadership, but keep doing what you're doing because you've seen the market. You're going to go after that market and you're probably going to do a really good job at it.
Yeah. I actually think between the two, we're more likely to see Mitel stay much more visible. They're trying to, there's a lot of opportunity for them to go capture, right, from all the, even all the companies they bought, where Avaya's got a much more well-defined customer base. And I still think we'll see some Avaya. I just don't think it'll be, I think you'll see much more Mitel than Avaya's.
Yeah. I totally agree. But I think the warning label there for Avaya is, like, yes, you're going after that enterprise 1,000, right? You're going after that global 1,000. But as we've seen in the last 10 years, it's not like the last 30 where the global 1,000 kind of stayed pretty standard and you knew exactly who those 1,000 were. There wasn't a whole lot of volatility in that upper echelon. That is not true today. Right? There is a lot more volatility in that upper enterprise space where companies are gone that used to be like mainstays in that category. So I think they also, again, it's about being part of a conversation, not necessarily making your go-to-market motion be as public. And I think this is where you start to realize there's a difference between go-to-market and thought leadership. And that's a whole nother episode that Charlie
I think even Enterprise Connect, Mitel was an Enterprise
to.
Connect, Avaya wasn't, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think that rounds us off very nicely for the day. 3 really interesting topics that we talked through. So thanks very much to all of our expert guests for joining me today. And thank you all for watching too. Bye for now.